has a little bit to do with perspective, so it seems like it might be appropriate today with my topic being choosing your perspective. It's about a husband. He and his wife are getting a little up in years, and the husband has just become very concerned about his wife's hearing. He doesn't just really think she's hearing anywhere near as well as she used to. But she doesn't seem to want to talk about it, and about going to a doctor about it or getting a hearing aid. So he's quite concerned. So he's talking to a family doctor, for getting some suggestions about how he could help his wife. And the doctor says, well, something kind of informal you could do that might really help find out if there's a problem and how severe a problem is. Just, pick a moment during the day when she's doing something and she's not looking at you. Maybe start about 40 feet away and say something to her. And if you don't get a response, then maybe go 30 feet, then 20 feet. And then you'll find out at what point, at what distance she's able to hear you. So he thinks that's a great idea, so he tries it. And an evening comes up soon. She's at the kitchen counter. She's cooking, preparing something for dinner. So he starts way back, about 40 feet back, and says, dear, what is for dinner? No response. Goes up like 30 feet away. Dear, what is for dinner tonight? No response. He's getting increasingly worried. Gets up to like 20 feet, something like that. Dear, what is for dinner? Still no response. Gets up right behind her and says, dear, what is for dinner? She turns and says, John, for the 5th time, it's chicken. Matter of perspective. Who has the problem? We don't know. Yeah, that's a good one. That's kind of the theme today, is something having to do with perspective. And I realize, it's a topic that comes up again and again. I know I've spoken about perspective before. I was looking at our archived talks on the website, and there's a talk by Elizabeth Betzel on perspective. There's a talk by lots of people. It's one of those topics you come back to again and again because it's sort of a divine power we have to work with our perspective. How we see things. I love the word perspective. It means, that's a Latin root, perspicere or something. It means to look through. Kind of like spectacles, which is a word that comes from the same root. We all look through different spectacles at the world. We see things differently. And we have different spectacles on sometimes in the course of a day. Doesn't your perspective shift sometimes dramatically in the course of a day? You wake up feeling one way and seeing the world one way, and later in the day, it's improved. Anyone ever have that experience? Things look a little better a little bit later in the day. What happens? Our perspective shifts. And we know it shifts, but very often it's an unconscious shift. We're not really conscious of how it's happening or if we're making it happen. Do you believe you can shift your perspective at will? Can you choose that? I think we can, but we're not always in a place where we're able to grasp that power. Viktor Frankl, in his amazing book, Man's Search for Meaning, had that definitive quote about this, that the last and greatest of human freedoms, the last and greatest freedom is to choose one's perspective in any set of circumstances, to choose one's attitude in any set of circumstances. And he did it in concentration camps. If you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. Choosing your perspective on how are you going to see these circumstances? How are you going to see it? And it's a very changeable thing. Our perspective is very malleable. It's very changeable. And that's something that's important for us to remember, because we have a tendency to think it's a fixed thing and we're correct. Would you agree? When we have a certain perspective on things, we're often pretty sure this is a set thing, it's correct, that's the way things are. Might look really different the next day, but we're still very certain our perspective is correct. It's an odd little facet of human nature, I think, the way our minds go. But our perspective on things can shift so dramatically. I've always been grateful. I've lived in an era of NASA and space travel and aerial shots of Earth from outer space, and other earlier generations did not have that benefit, and it totally changed our perspective of where we live. Wouldn't you agree? The very first one that came out, that beautiful blue-green marble image of Earth, That was from Apollo 8 in 1968. And we all saw that for the first time. Do you remember that? We all know the image. Once you've seen this picture of our Earth, glowing, gorgeous orb of swirling blue and green, you never forget that. It gives you a new perspective on where you live, something we didn't have before. In 1977, they sent out these the Voyagers, which were supposed to be a 2-year study of Saturn and Jupiter, take pictures way out the outer planets. They kept going, of course, and we got all kinds of images. The last one of Earth it took from the outer edge of the solar system. You can see Earth as a pale blue dot suspended in a sunbeam. Yet another perspective on Earth, that it's tiny, that it's in the midst of a vast cosmos, and yet it's this blue-green glowing orb. Those things help us in our perspective, I think, help us take a higher view somehow. I've always liked, too, that on those Voyager probes, the unmanned probes that went out into the solar system, they're still out there. I guess it's going to be 40,000 years before they encounter another galaxy. There's on board each of them the golden record. Are you all familiar with that? It's a fabulous thing. I think it was Carl Sagan's brainchild, that they put together this golden record of encrypted images from Earth, 115 different images of Earth, everything from dancers to elephants to all kinds of things, lots and lots of sounds, whale song and thunder and beautiful natural sounds, flowing water, and lots of music, everything from Aboriginal songs from Australia to Johnny Be Good. Johnny Be Good is on the golden record. I love that. And it's spinning out there, and greetings from Earth people in 55 different languages, sent out into the universe as kind of an emissary of this is who we are, and we're eager to make contact with others. It's lovely. And it's lovely the way we presented ourselves in that golden record. We didn't present our problems and our challenges and our conflicts and our wars. We presented this is who we are. This is the lushness of our world. This is the beauty and the creativity of our nature. That's what we sent out into the world. I love that. That gives me a higher perspective somehow. And taking that higher perspective can be very helpful in the midst of challenges. I'm on a beautiful blue-green orb spinning through the universe full of vast possibilities in this amazing cosmos. So how do we work with our perspective? If we want to take more conscious control, if we want to choose our perspective more consciously so that we're not made unhappy by our perspectives, because of course the perspective we're in greatly impacts our mood, would you agree? Greatly impacts how happy or unhappy we are, how peaceful or agitated we are, totally linked to the perspective we're taking on things. And we have the ability to manage that perspective. We can become more conscious of what our perspective is and make choices about, is that where I want it to stay, or is there another viewpoint I can take here that will be one that's more empowering for me, that will bring me more peace and more energy. Because certain perspectives, they kind of lay us out flat, don't they? Take away our energy, make us feel like things are hopeless. What's the point of trying anything? And then another one fills us with energy. There's so much I can do. There's so many possibilities available to me. Taking that higher, that different perspective will do that. There's a wonderful little biblical story from Genesis about Abram and Lot. And they're having conflict. They're kinsmen, but they're having conflict. This is from Genesis 13, trying to share the same territory. They all have families and kinspeople and flocks and herds and tents and, they're big nomadic sort of households, and they're trying to share this land, and they're having a lot of strife. That's a biblical word for big-time conflict. And so Abram shows a little more wisdom, and he says, let's separate and divide the land and each take a portion of it. And he invited Lot to choose first. So Lot chose the most beautiful land around them, the well-watered land along the Jordan River. And he chose that. And then Abram was to decide what portion he was going to take. And this is where the scripture comes in. we're told that the Lord leads Abram up a mountaintop, higher perspective, and urged him to look out and up. He says, raise your eyes now and look from the place where you are. For all the land that you see I will give to you and to your offspring forever. That's a wonderful teaching story for us, I think. Get yourself up out of the conflict. They were down here. They didn't have any satellite aerial views of the land around them in those days. They saw what was around them and the strife and the confusion. And God guidance said, the Lord said to Abram, get your head up out of the conflict, take a higher perspective, and look at all the possibilities available to you. It's a vast universe. It's spread out in every direction. Choose what you want. That's really, I think that's a lesson for us on God guidance from within us. Will also be helping us out of a situation where our perspective is limiting us. Guidance will be coming about how to shift that perspective, how to take a higher view and see greater possibilities for ourselves, see the vast possibilities in life that sometimes we can just be shut off from because our view is so fixed and so limited. We have opportunities for this every day and in every set of circumstances we encounter. I had a very personal one recently in my family. My sister, some of you know, had mastectomy surgery going on 3 weeks ago. It'll be 3 weeks tomorrow. Pretty intensive surgery. And in the process, when you discover something like that, you get a diagnosis like that, your perspective shifts like this, of course. All of a sudden, you are dealing with a completely different set of circumstances. And there's a lot of sense of powerlessness. There's a lot of fear. It can be very narrowing when you're focused on fear, on physical issues and diagnoses and what could happen. There can certainly be feelings of anger that this happened to you. Why should it happen to you? Why should it happen to anybody? And those kinds of concerns and lots of anxiety. And I think my sister experienced some of that going along the way. But her focus shifted, the perspective shifted pretty rapidly and pretty dramatically, as it does for many people, I think. And her focus is now on how fortunate she is to have come through such a surgery like that, to be on the road to recovery so well. Her focus is on the tremendous, generous support she's been getting on all sides. Her congregants are dropping off a meal a day on her porch, a meal a day for a month, because she doesn't cook. Her family, her son and daughter are right there at her side. Support in all kinds of shapes and sizes, angels visible and invisible on all sides. I wanted to share with you a story that kind of illustrated that so nicely, that I just was amused and heartened by. In the midst of this, only a few days past the surgery, she had to go back to the medical facility for a follow-up appointment with her surgeon. And her son and daughter were on either side. She's a little shaky, just a few days past major surgery. And they get to this building, and the elevator isn't working to go up to the second floor. And they're just kind of fumbling what to do. They don't know the building that well. When two men approach, they have uniforms on. One is a suit, one has a uniform. One's a director of operations, the other guy's a facilities manager. And they arrive just in time to help them figure out the elevator. One walks up to the second floor, stairs my sister couldn't have taken, works with it on that side, gets the elevator to come down, the other guy helps them on, they get out on the second floor, and that director of operations says, I'm going to walk you on down to the office where it is so you won't get lost along the way. Little guiding angels along the way. So they get to the appointment, it goes well, she goes home reassured she had a good appointment and reassured by the assistance they got. And my niece, her daughter, Catherine, mentioned that after that happened with the elevator, she said, Mom, did you happen to notice his name on his shirt? And I said, no. She said, it's Jesus. His name's Jesus. And you can't make this stuff up. It's just, I know that's a common name in Spanish, but it's spelled Jesus, you know? And for anybody from a Christian culture, that's kind of impressive. Jesus showed up to help my sister with this follow-up appointment with her surgeon. She's getting generous support from the universe. What a shift in perspective. Which one is more empowering? The one that feels you feel victimized by illness being thrust upon you and your body never being the same, and how unfair it is you have to deal with that? Or the perspective that, I've got generous support on all sides. The universe has got my back. And I'm ready to move forward, and I'm healing rapidly, and all kinds of possibilities are out ahead of me. We can choose day to day, moment by moment. I think of it as a little bit like changing focus, like in a graphics software program. I used to use one on a Mac called PageMaker. It's probably long gone now. Anyone remember PageMaker? I love that little program. I did newsletters and things like that. But it had this lovely feature that I think many graphics packages have. It's like send to back or bring forward. Send to back, send backward or bring forward. Are you familiar with the feature? It just means whenever you're dealing with in some kind of a graphics, like a newsletter, it's got pictures and text, and sometimes they're overlapping. And you want to work with the text and not the photo behind it, or the photo and not the text. You can click on something and say, send that to the back. Or you can click on something and say, bring that to the forward and put the other stuff behind it. We have this capacity to change this focus in terms of our perspective in our minds. We can take a perspective that's bringing us misery or making us feel lacking and limited. We can look at that perspective and send it to the back. And we can bring to the fore something else. And they're truths, they're equal truths. In many ways, they're more powerful truths, farther reaching truths. I'm ill, I've had to have surgery. Yeah, that's certainly a fact, that's a set of circumstances. But I can kind of send that to the back a little bit and see what it's kind of masking and bring that forward. And what's bringing that forward is that I was blessed this came to my attention. I was blessed I was able to get this treated. I'm blessed to live in a country where treatment is available to me. I'm blessed that I have insurance to pay for it. I'm blessed that I've come through it well, and I'm heading out more healthy and strong into a new chapter of my life. That's true too. Which is the more empowering perspective? We can choose it. We can choose it. We can take conscious choice of that in ways great and small, day by day. And the choice is always, what's going to give me a greater feeling of empowerment? What's going to energize me and enable me to move forward in greater strength and peace and happiness? Or what's going to keep me miserable and stuck? That's the kind of choice. Or just make me unhappy for a good long while. Comes up in little ways every day, I think. Some of you know, Joe and I discontinued our every month First Saturday Chant concert thing we did for more than 7 years. This past summer, June was our last regular monthly one. We do host occasional concerts now. But fairly often, from time to time, someone will say, oh, I really miss those First Saturday chants. Really miss those. It's such a shame. We discontinued them. And I always think it's kind of sweet that they mention that. They want to communicate that they enjoyed them, I guess. But on the other hand, the shift on perspective on that is, we had 7.5 great years, We shared a lot of wonderful music with people. We brought in some really amazing musical talent that probably a lot of people wouldn't have encountered before. We spread a lot of good music around, the kind that uplifts us in mind and heart. So instead of looking at the lack, let's look at what we had, and celebrate and give thanks for that. We're always at choice about that. Maybe I was telling jokes last night, musician jokes. This is one I didn't tell, but it reminds me of this point about how we can choose. The one about how many folk singers does it take to change a light bulb? It takes 2. One to change the bulb, the other one to write a song about how good the old bulb was. I just love that because it's so us, isn't it? It's really easy to take that perspective, oh, things used to be so much better. When it's really a much more empowering perspective to say, we had some great times, we were really blessed by that experience, but this is where we are now, and what are we going to do now? What's the next adventure? What's the next joy we're going to share? It doesn't help a lot to look back at things and remind, kind of dwell on the idea they're not with us anymore. They're not around anymore. Does that empower? It doesn't. But what empowers us is gratitude. We can shift to gratitude, how blessed we were by that, how other people were blessed by that, how, what a rare and wonderful gift it was that we even had that experience in our lives, that we had those people in our lives that aren't with us anymore, that we had those experiences we shared together. What a treasure, what a blessing. That's more empowering. And then we're more open to the next treasure and the next adventure. I think this is why spiritual teachings emphasize where we put our perspective so strongly. This is Apostle Paul from Philippians, very familiar teaching. Whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, are pure, are lovely, are of good report, if there is any virtue, and if there is anything praiseworthy, think on these things. Think on these things. It's excellent advice. Hard to carry out day by day, because our human minds want to sometimes gravitate to lack and loss and limitation and victimhood. But we can consciously choose differently. We can work with that. And we can get better at shifting our perspective quite consciously. I'm not going to look at that. I'm going to shift my focus a little bit. What do I have to be grateful for today? What are the blessings that maybe I'm not seeing right now I want to bring forward, in front of the other stuff and realize, boy, I really do have a lot to give thanks for. This is a good week for that, for realizing how richly blessed we are in so many ways. We can choose our perspective. We can flex it. We can learn to flex our perspective like we do a muscle. You know how you flex a muscle, and as you do that, it gets stronger and stronger? I think we can do that with our perspective choosing. We can train ourselves to become more aware of how am I thinking right now? How am I seeing things? And can I shift that in a way that's going to make me feel more empowered and energized? And we can look at that. And the more we do it, the stronger we get. The stronger we get. I choose a higher perspective, and I am blessed. Want to join me in that affirmation today? I choose a higher perspective, and I am blessed. Let's take that into prayer for a moment. Affirm the truth of that deep within as we take up that divine capacity to choose how we will see things, as we choose our perspective and shift it in a direction that empowers us, that energizes us, that brings us greater peace. We will experience greater blessings. Moment by moment, day by day, God has given us this power to choose. We take it up. We are ready to use it, and we give thanks for it. And so it is. Amen.